Hello everybody, welcome to the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Today we are going to be talking about the treasures of Utah. I'm not talking about the fact that we've got all kinds of terrain and landscape and that it's the prettiest state in the country. I know I'm not prejudiced in the least degree. We are talking about the treasures of the state of Utah, the historical gifts that have been left behind from previous cultures, the artifacts of prehistory and history, and what is happening to them with all the people that are becoming part of the outdoor culture. Been a massive shift in the last year, and there are a lot more people on public land. And whether intentional or unintentional, things are happening to the treasures that tell our story. Let's find out about it.
Thanks, Chad. We're out here in Moab, Utah today with the Bureau of Land Management to look at a couple of sites that are pretty close to the road where vandalism and graffiti have become a real problem.
Chalk, ash from firewood, also chipping into the structures or bullet holes. You know, people unwittingly will deface it by touching the patina or touching the actual rock art and altering the patina of it with the oils of their skin. Some of the figures that on this panel are up to 13,000 years old, and the patina was developed obviously prior to that. And so you're looking, you know, at a minimum of 13,000 years of history here, and to undo or replicate some of that is difficult.
Antiquities ranging from millions of years to as recent as 50 years ago are protected by federal law, the intent being to protect irreplaceable pieces of history that are publicly accessible for everyone to enjoy. Once a site is ruined, restoration is only temporary, maybe lasting 15 years if it is deemed that the restoration itself won't further degrade the site. Once disturbed, an image, and the whole site for that matter, are permanently impacted.
That's correct. Any damage that we see tends to be permanent if it's if someone's touched the panel itself. It can bleed out onto the rock art, or it can permanently make it so that it can't be seen again.
The Bureau of Land Management is in a difficult spot because they manage millions of acres of public lands in Utah with thousands of sites, just like the one we toured today. Their goals include both the protection and enjoyment of these rock images by the public.
These were probably the ancestral relatives of the Paiute and the Ute. Okay.
Now, for those explorers who wish to leave their mark, they just ask that they use a more modern means to do so.
We recognize that there's something ingrained that sometimes folks want to say, I was here. And instead of leaving your mark physically on the place, we ask folks to, take a picture, learn from the site, and, instead of physically leaving their mark, post it on their social media or share with your friends and family.
We're definitely seeing increase in visitation and an increase in incidents of graffiti and vandalism.
And unfortunately, the actions of a few careless individuals can ruin a panel for everyone. For the county seat, I'm Dowsett.
Thanks, Derek. That sets us up perfectly for a conversation with our panel of experts. We'll join our guests here right after we take this commercial break on the county seat. Welcome back to the county seat. We're having a conversation today about protecting our archaeological treasures here in the state of Utah, a state that is abundantly blessed with an archaeological history that spans thousands of years, and there's history all the way through. So joining us for our conversation, Nate Thomas, who is the state archaeologist for the Bureau of Land Management and the executive director of the governor's Public Lands Policy Coordinating Office, Redge Johnson, a frequent guest on this program.
Good to be here with you.
We are getting a lot more reports of damaged archaeological finds. Now, I've had some people actually argue on this point as we were coming up to this conversation that, well, the reason that you are finding more is that there are more people out there to report them. What is your response to that?
First off, Chad, I really appreciate the way you started this conversation talking about how that they're treasures, how they're archaeological treasures, because these are the historic, prehistoric traditional resources that we have on our public lands in Utah are, like you said, they're amazing. They're priceless. They're really special. They have a lot of meaning to a lot of people. And so I think using those terms is really important. We are seeing vandalism, and I guess we're all sometimes a little shocked sometimes when we see the vandalism to these important historic resources.
But the question remains is that as I've talked to people about this, they say, well, that's just probably because there are more people out there and they're finding it and reporting it, not that the frequency is occurring more. What evidence do you guys have as far as that goes? Is that a correct assumption, or is that part of it, or is that none of it?
So I would have to say that it's maybe part of it, but I would say it doesn't matter. I mean, we can't have these archaeological treasures vandalized, whether it's more people or the same number of people. The fact that we're seeing more damage to these archaeological sites is a real concern for the state of Utah, and we're very serious about protecting our archaeological resources. And Chad, as you may know, our office does a lot of the archaeological permitting for the state, for the archaeologists, and for permitting on all the on all the state institutional trust lands and state lands and private lands. And it doesn't matter where the vandalism's occurring or who's doing it. We just need to ask people to respect these sites when they're out there, and we love to have them on these public lands and visiting these public lands, but they need to be respectful of this heritage and the culture that we have. It doesn't matter if it's our pioneer culture or pioneer heritage or the Native American heritage, or it just doesn't matter. We should all be respectful of those sites.
A cliff dwelling in Kane County is, or San Juan County is equally as important as, say, the Swayze Cabin and the San Rafael Swell, because they're all part of history. Where are you seeing the most damage?
I think we're seeing, I don't know if we can point to just one specific resource. These resources are fragile, and sometimes there can be inadvertent damage, or there can be intentional damage. One thing that we do see out there is collectors' piles, where people will go to say a historic site, and there may be historic artifacts on the surface, and they take those, they want to show other people the artifacts, so they'll pick them up and then take them and maybe put them by the road or put them by the sign, and make these little collector piles of what is on the site. And that's damage in itself, because they're taking the clues of the past and rearranging them. So when us archaeologists get out there, we don't see what it was like.
So as an example, let's say you're out on any one of the number of towns on the old railroad grade, and you're walking and you see some Chinese pottery out there. Does that mean you're not supposed to touch it?
What I tell people is they're not supposed to illegally remove it and take it home with them and move it to another location, but actually picking it up and looking at it, taking a picture of it, and then leaving it where they found it, that's totally okay.
What's been the biggest surprise to you, Reg, in the time you've been, at the helm of it? I'm sure you were aware of it some, because you've been with Plipco for a while, but is there any trends that are taking you by surprise in it?
Yeah, just the increase in the frequency of it, and the blatantness of it. I forget the recent one that was on the big boulder that had the fence around it.
There was one at, I think it was called Birthing Rock.
Birthing Rock, exactly. And people climb over a fence, go over there, and then scratch their name or initials into it, and then leave. It's like the disregard and the blatant way people do that is just striking to me. And then we had another climber that put some bolts in a panel, things like that. Vandalism, as we call it, can't continue to occur. And we're hoping that we can educate them. And hopefully, if that doesn't work, Plipco is tasked with providing the enforcement on some of these things, especially on state and private lands. And we work with BLM on that as well. And that's the last place that we want to go. I mean, we hope that the education will work, and that if folks are out there and they see people that are doing this, that the public will help educate whoever it is that's climbing on these archaeological sites or climbing through ruins and things like that if they're not supposed to be, that we can get them to help us to stop this.
Stay with us. We'll be back with more of our conversation on archaeology here on the county seat right after this break. Welcome back to the county seat. We're having a conversation today about archaeology in the state of Utah, some of our treasures that are losing some of their historical value because of our actions in this day and age. You know, it would be sad for the archaeology of this day and age to be the destruction, you know, that's what they remember about us in this day and age 200 years from now, is how destructive we were to the archaeology for the last 10,000 years.
Yeah, it's, you know, archaeologists are really interested in putting the story together. We're interested in telling the stories that haven't been told. And we do that through the remains of the past. And those remains of the past are, you know, they're objects. And when those objects are moved or damaged or taken, we can't tell the full story. Mm-hmm. And I've just in my experience as an archaeologist over the past 20 years, that's my favorite part of the job is telling that story. But it is difficult when you go to a site and you can't tell the full story because the time diagnostic artifacts such as arrowheads or dart points or pottery have been removed from the site. So there's that's a pretty obvious damage is collection, but there's other things that can happen. On an at your leisure trip down in Kane County, and we went out somewhere, and there was some markings from like 18 something or other put in axle grease along a trail. Now that would be akin to somebody carving their initials in a tree. Which, you know, a lot of young people did in the 30s and put their initials in there and put a heart around it. What's the difference? Well, for me, it's just respecting our ancestors. There's a site in southern Utah where members of Parley P. Pratt's Southern Expedition in 1859, where they were coming through a canyon and they signed their name on the rock. And when I go to that site and I see those signatures, for me, how I interpret southern Utah history is that's the start of so many of those southern Utah communities. Mm-hmm. As that expedition was leaving central Utah and going through the canyon and arriving in the Parowan Valley, and then Parowan Valley, you know, expanding out to so many other communities. For me, that's that moment in time is really neat. And I have a connection to that. And so when I see that, I'd hope that, you know, my kids, my grandkids, and their kids would be able to go to the same location and see the signatures of that expedition and tie that history back to the settling of southern Utah. And I think that's my connection, but then we have to be respectful to other people and their connections. So members of tribal nations may see a site and they say, yeah, this is my connection. This has the same meaning because that was, you know, my family or so on. And so I think, to answer your question, people do like to put their names. They do like to write. They like to say I was here. But I think it's equally important to recognize those who came before us.
So basically that statement would be, don't carve your name next to Butch Cassidy's. People used to sign their names. Do we just take a picture now?
I think we just take a picture. We have other means to sign. Yeah. Were you kind of going there?
I was thinking of the same thing, right? You know, it's interesting. I anticipated this question might come up over the weekend, so I was wondering how to respond to that, because I think there's a natural instinct for people to leave their mark where they've been, right? So if that's your thing, then you know, there's other ways that we have of leaving our mark in today's society, and whether that's electronically or through photos, or, you know, we have paper where the past, you know, you didn't write your story down. There's a different way to leave your mark, but you don't need to put your initials or your name next to these historic artifacts, especially when we're dealing with tribal nations and those folks that were here, you know, for thousands of years before. We can respect those sites because we have other ways of, or means of making our mark in the world.
In my example, it's, you know, these were early explorers coming through, historic explorers coming through this area, and you know, they walked there from Salt Lake. And whereas maybe our moment of being there is maybe not so grand, where we just showed up for 5 minutes and then left.
Let's take a break and come back and talk about prescriptive things that people can and proactively should be doing. We'll be right back on the County Seat. Welcome back to the County Seat. We are having a conversation about archaeology and the damage that's happening and the new forms of vandalism, unintentional or intentional, that's going on. I mean, we catch the headlines. The guy pushes over the hoodoo, somebody takes a couple of shots, leaves a black tire mark on a dinosaur track. All these things are happening, and we hear about them occasionally. But what can people who don't want to be jerks, what can they do to help the situation along? What do they need to be aware of?
Well, when you visit our public lands, it's great to be outside, and it's great to, you know, experience the, you know, the recreational activities. But we just all need to remember that we should treat the land and those things that are within the land respectful. You know, I think we've talked a lot about the things that we can do to not collect or to not take artifacts home with us. If you see damage like that, you know, you can report it. So if you go to an area where you think something has been vandalized or things have been damaged, you can report it to, you know, local BLM office, to the Forest Service, to the Park Service, to any of the agencies.
Do they have a mechanism for that? Is there like a report damage website or something like that, or do they just have to call an office?
Well, there is an archaeological vandalism tip line that we maintain, but more importantly, they can just look up the local office, local BLM office, or what have you, and call them.
Another thing that we'd like to see is the public educating the public. A lot of times the message comes better from friends or family than it does from people from the government. And we're hoping that through this campaign, and I know Pitt Gruey with the Office of Outdoor Rec, and Vicki Varela from our tourism office, they're both working on this issue as well as Department of Natural Resources and all our federal partners, and just trying to get the word out and to say, hey, can you help us with this issue? We don't have time to wait on this. We're seeing an increase in visitation, and we hope to be able to curtail this activity immediately so that it doesn't continue. And we think that the public having that discussion with friends and families is the best way, or one of the best ways that we can help alleviate this problem.
Chad, for information on, you know, what to do when you visit a site, I know the State Historic Preservation Office has campaigns to combat vandalism, and we're working on our Respect and Protect campaigns, and we're going to be having social media posts throughout the summer that talk about how to, you know, visit sites respectfully.
Is there any value in people speaking up on the trail when they see somebody misbehaving, going, hey, that's not cool, or is that just an invitation for trouble?
I think we definitely want to play that one by ear. I think if it's members, like Reg said, if it's members of your family, I think it's easy to speak up. But I don't think we as agencies are asking anyone to confront someone about bad behavior.
I would have to agree with Nate on that. Just report it. And I would also say, if you see vandalism out there, report it immediately so that we can kind of put a timeline together. A lot of times, that's the only way that we're able to find people that are vandalizing these sites, is if we have a really strong timeline and we hear about it immediately.
How would you develop leads on something like that? I mean, I get the value of doing it, but it's like, you know, how do you put the perps at the different places in the timeline?
We have very good law enforcement that does that, and I don't know how they do it. But
One thing we do as an agency is we do have site monitors. We have a site monitoring program, volunteers who work with us and the State Historic Preservation Office. And so what we are doing is we have for a select number of sites in Utah, actually into the hundreds, we have monitors who go out periodically and take pictures of sites, and so that they can know the condition of the site and what's changed from time to time. And that's a good starting point for us.
What should people be aware of when they're out? That incidentally, I mean, they're out on horseback, they're out on a side-by-side, they're taking a Jeep or their camper down a backcountry road. What should they be looking for so that they don't inadvertently do something?
When you're coming up to what is obviously a historic site, or obviously a prehistoric site, whether it's historic buildings or prehistoric structures or petroglyphs, usually that's not the only part of the archaeological site. There are artifacts around that site, so it's best to not drive right up to the sites. Just take a step back, and in a way you get to enjoy the site a little bit more if you park your vehicle and casually walk, and then you get to see a little bit more.
Gentlemen, thank you. This has been a great conversation. I wish we could carry it on. Pay attention. You need to be able to help on this, get involved in this, and remember, local involvement. Local government is where your life happens. Be involved, be part of it, and share this conversation with your friends, as many friends as you can. We'll see you next week on the County Seat. Thank you for watching the County Seat. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications to keep up to date on the program and happenings around Utah.